Hey, it's Emily, and it's been a while since I've talked about the Nintendo 3DS here on the channel, but I thought it was a good time to sort of reflect on my 3DS collecting journey and also kind of talk about a larger theme when it comes to buying games towards the end of a console's life cycle. Because, like many of you who may be watching, I did end up participating in the Fomo buying when it came to picking up a few games right before the eShop closed last year. So the Nintendo 3DS just so happens to be one of my favorite handhelds of all time, and was actually the system that got me back into gaming after my long hiatus during my college and grad school years. I've shared the story a couple times on the channel already, but it was back in 2013 when I heard about a sequel to one of my favorite games of all time, A Link to the Past, was coming out on the Nintendo 3DS. And so I just had to grab the system, and this is what sparked my kind of rediscovery and my love for game collecting. I was a very poor grad student at the time, but I did manage to save up and splurge on this brand new limited edition, and also pick up a handful of games throughout the years when I was still completing my doctoral degree. So I did pick up a number of heavy hitters, and this is also the era that I kind of discovered and really figured out that JRPGs were my favorite gaming genre. I discovered my love for strategy RPGs with Fire Emblem Awakening, experiencing my first ever farming RPG hybrid game with Rune Factory 4, and also discovering an all-time favorite game with Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology. So fast forward to 2022 when we all heard the news that Nintendo was going to officially close their Nintendo eShop for the 3DS on March 27th, 2023. And at the time, I felt pretty good with the games I had in my 3DS collection because I was consciously picking up a lot of games that interested me over the years. But there were still a number of games that I was interested in that I did end up FOMO buying and kind of paying up for them, thinking that this was probably going to be the best price we would see these games ever again due to the news of the eShop closure. So thankfully, a lot of the really expensive games that shot up, I was either not interested in, or they're ones that I had already obtained, such as the Fire Emblem Fates Special Edition. That included both Birthright and Conquest, along with the DLC on the cartridge. But now I just want to kind of share the games that I did end up FOMO buying and kind of sharing the prices that I paid back then compared to what they're going for now. But a little bit of a spoiler here, 3DS prices have substantially decreased since all the rapid buying that happened in 2023. So I've set aside a couple of titles that I wanted to compare prices of what I paid generally around in 2022, 2023, compared to what they are today. The first being Kid Icarus Uprising. And you'll notice that I ended up getting the UAE edition and not just the regular North American edition. And while the game cartridge is exactly the same in this edition compared to the North American edition, I will say as a collector, this little icon here does bug me still a tad bit when it comes to looking at my games on my shelf. Should it matter? Probably not, but you can't help but be a little bit picky, I think, when you are a collector. I'm not really the best when it comes to record keeping with the amount I pay for each game, but thankfully I do have a video of where I picked this exact edition up at PMP Games Online, which is a Canadian retailer that ships worldwide. And I believe I paid around $70. I'll have the exact price here. And if we'll look at today, you'll see that this Kid Icarus Uprising game has substantially decreased in value. And looking at pricecharting.com's website, it's a little bit difficult to discern the difference between the UAE prices versus the regular ESRB prices that were distributed through North America. But generally, I think most of us know that UAE editions tend to be cheaper, at least here in the US, compared to the other edition. The next title I wanted to compare is another one I thankfully documented on the channel, and that is Project Cross Zone 2. And I ended up buying the first one and the second game here, but I believe the second one was the more expensive between the two. So I'll be comparing prices for this one. And one of the reasons why this is really expensive, I think when I got this back in 2022, was because this was one of the titles that was already delisted from the eShop. So people were kind of scrambling to get physical copies of these since that was the only way to legitimately get it at the time. But if we look at the trends of how much this was back in 2022, 2023, you'll see that the prices have lowered substantially. Another title I really wanted to get because I'm a big One Piece fan was One Piece Zero Dawn, and this comes with the holographic slipcase. that I believe was a GameStop exclusive at the time. And you'll notice that this was a numbered release, so there's only a finite number that were in circulation at the time. And a lot of the ones that were on eBay and those other secondhand shops were absurdly priced. I'm trying to recall how much I purchased for this. I want to say it was at least $60 at the time, which again, it's over MSRP. And if we look at the trends here, you'll see it has since declined from its peak. Now, I was pretty good with keeping up with JRPGs prior to the announcement of the eShop closure, but there was this one particular Dragon Quest game that I still needed to get. That was Dragon Quest VII. And this is also really important to get because of the additional DLC that you can only get when you reach the end of the game, which, as you can see, this is still a sealed copy, so I unfortunately did not make the time to get that for my 3DS system. But this one I definitely did pay up, I think in the $80, $90 range. It wasn't as bad as Dragon Quest VIII, which I think I bought a couple years prior to this one, but it was one of the last few JRPGs I still needed to scoop up back then, and you could see now what the price is today. So these last two games were ones that definitely hurt the wallet the most when it comes to how much I spend on them. Now, I'm probably going to look like a clown sharing how much I exactly paid for these. Thankfully, I did have some Amazon gift cards to make it a little bit better, but still the sticker price on these were quite a bit and much more than I tend to spend on games. The most, unfortunately, being the Professor Layton and the Azerin Legacy, which you could see how much I paid for right there. This was a franchise I really wanted to scoop up because at the time we thought Level 5 was gone and done and they weren't coming back, and they still, for the most part, have kind of come back, but they've been kind of delaying a lot of their Switch releases that they've promised us. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with Level 5 going forward. These were also games I just thought probably wouldn't see ports or remasters in the future. There is going to be a new Professor Layton game coming out on the Switch eventually. It's supposed to be next year, but we'll see. And I don't really see them doing some sort of collection of the 3DS games and pour them back to the Switch because Level 5 already has so much on their plate that they haven't released yet. And the other game that I picked up for a lot, but not as much as Azerin Legacy, was Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. And this is another one I really wanted to scoop up because I didn't really think it was going to get a port to the Switch or on a future system. Because generally, just like with the Project Cross Zone games, when you have a ton of IPs and different companies working together, it just complicates things if we want to kind of see those games happen again in the future. And you can see kind of what I paid and how much it goes for now. So why am I bringing up the Nintendo 3DS in 2024, reflecting on FOMO buying right before the eShop closure? Well, there is another console that recently also saw its digital storefront close, and that is the Xbox 360. And I think the longer you get into video game collecting or just collecting in general, you tend to see a lot of patterns. I think whenever we hear some sort of news of something being no longer accessible to us, like a digital storefront closing, you can't help but kind of revert into a FOMO state. And I definitely did this with the Nintendo 3DS. Over the last few years, especially since 2020, we've been seeing a huge boom in the retro gaming market. And I think a lot of us are just really worried of not being able to obtain certain titles and games on different systems at an affordable price. That's sort of where all this FOMO is happening. We've seen it again with the 3DS, as I illustrated, and kind of the path I went down for a couple of these titles. And I think after kind of participating in some of those kind of end of life cycle FOMO buying, I feel more comfortable stepping back and away from systems that are experiencing those huge spikes in prices. So that's sort of why I haven't really talked about the Xbox 360 at all on the channel, especially not lately. Not only is it just a system I don't own currently, even though there are a couple titles I may be interested in, but just prices I think are going to continue to rise now that that storefront is closed, even though a lot of those titles you still can get on the Series X or the more modern platforms due to the backwards compatibility that Xbox and Microsoft have kind of built into the Series X's ecosystem. But regardless, I think there are a lot of titles that I just don't really need at this point in time, and it's okay for me to wait on them because I don't think they're going to rise substantially more than where they are right now. So doing all this reflecting and kind of seeing where prices are currently compared to where they were a year or two ago, do I regret buying these physical copies of these 3DS games? Well, the answer is no. But no big surprise, I'm a big physical collector and very pro ownership when it comes to video games and physical media. Now, are there games upon reflection that I probably should have exercised a little bit more patience with? Of course. I think most of these I've only would have saved maybe a few dollars, and who knows, in a year or two from now, they might go even lower than they are currently. But I think for now, I'm pretty happy with what my collection's at. There are a couple games that I kind of wish I picked up at the time that are still really expensive, but are they games that I really need in my collection? Probably not. And with a couple of these titles now receiving Switch ports, it's possible that more of these games from the 3DS library will no longer be locked to the system and also see kind of new life on a new modern system in the future, which I think would be great. And if that devalues these games even further, I don't really mind because, again, I like having a 3DS collection because the 3DS is a console that just means so much to me. But now that I have the experience of buying up games towards the end of a console life cycle, I feel like I'm a little bit more mature as a collector and more willing to exercise patience for certain things and be even more deliberate when it comes to purchasing for my curated collection. So I'm hoping this video acts, I guess, as a cautionary note when it comes to buying up games towards the end of a console's life cycle, but also adds some further perspective when it comes to buying up games for consoles we love and not feeling too bad if you accidentally spend a little bit more on a game than if you would have waited a year or so down the line. But anyway, let me know if you also bought into the 3DS Fomo buying like I did, or the more recent Xbox 360 one. And also let me know what your favorite 3DS title is if you have one. And until my next video, bye guys.